Hi, this is Niels Johnson again. Obviously, this is the second part to a two-part series I'm doing on a model for an information-centric approach to risk, definition, and mitigation. I think I'm stating the obvious if I were to say that if you didn't listen to the first part or watch the first part, you really need to go do that because the second part isn't going to make any sense unless you do. So obviously I ended the first part with encryption, and I obviously don't need to repeat anything there. I do want to start with ownership. And as far as the information intelligence level is concerned, ownership is critical at a variety of different levels. And let me do a bit of definition here. Ownership is not necessarily authorship. Typically, it might be the person who authored the document or generated the data. But more importantly, in this day, at least as far as this model is concerned, it's more about who's using it. And perhaps even what it's being used or whom it's being used for. So ownership helps us at the point of data classification. Ownership helps us as far as discovery at times. And so understanding the ownership of the data is important. And then lastly, as far as this tier is concerned, there's discovery. Yes, we live in a litigious society. And, when when that thing rears its ugly head and you've got to get back into email archives, or frankly, now virtually everything is discoverable, you certainly don't want to do that using manual processes. And so having a technology that can dig into these archives and pull up specific emails within specific time frames for specific people or specific subject matter is becoming critically important. Not only to require or to respond to the discovery requests, but simply to minimize the hit as far as resources are concerned and accuracy. As I said before, people, 3 strikes, inefficient, ineffective, error-prone, and this is one of those places where that is absolutely drop-dead true. Okay, so now let's talk through the steps here. Once I have the information infrastructure piece which is in place, which the rest of this is going to build on, and frankly it has to be in place before I can go any higher in the stack. Once that's in place, then I can build the information intelligence layer, which is going to allow me to derive a lot of information from the environment and frankly begin to control that environment. Both of those have to be in place. Once they're there though, then I can move up to information governance. And now we can look at the entire environment from a more strategic perspective. And one of the places, frankly, I think the most critical place is in that upper left-hand corner, policy. Man, if there's technologies available, parentheses, and there are, that would allow me to impose policy on the data per its classification. You know, what is important and what's not important. If I know what is important, then I can impose policy on that important data to determine what actually could or could not happen to it once it was received by one of my, I'll use the word customers, be it a partner, supplier, employee, vendor, whatever. If it's really hypercritical stuff, when it hits their desktop or whatever it happens, I can shut off print, I can shut off copy, I can impose policy to determine what's going to happen to that data. Frankly, I can impose policy on where I'm going to allow that data or those documents to be sent. But the whole point is, if I can impose policy on the data per its classification, I've just solved a lot of my security issues. Similarly, if I can understand who that individual is, if I can exercise some identity parameters, some authentication authorization parameters to understand exactly what their qualifications are to tap into my data repositories. And now we're talking about 2-factor or 3-factor authentication in this day. And let me stop and sort of interrupt myself right here. And 2-factor and 3-factor authentication is being considered as to how strong or legitimate authentication processes they are. Frankly, in this day, perhaps some of that factoring needs to be around, in case of just what you know, what you have, who you are. Perhaps some other technologies. One of the more interesting areas is in biokinetics, how you sign, not your digital signature, but how you make your digital signature can be an extremely interesting identifier, along with some other things. The whole point here is understanding who it is that's trying to tap into your environment. if this is a customer or a supplier or a partner, they may get access to different layers of the data classification stack. If they're the executive vice president for security in charge of all things data, obviously they're going to get into deeper levels. The point is, if I can impose policy on the data per its classification, and I can impose policy on the individual per their authorization as they have authenticated themselves to my environment, I've just solved a huge percentage of my security issues, and I've done so with a very high level of automation. Compliance. So I haven't read all of the compliance documents. I've not. I wish that I had, but the interesting fact, none of the compliance. Well, let me go back to an earlier statistic. I said in an earlier video that in last year, the security space discovered 6,787 new potentially exploitable vulnerabilities. I did a quick math, and I said that's 19 a day. And then I asked the hard question: do you know that? Well, here's sort of the follow-up to that. Do you know that none of the compliance documents, none of them say that if you have a potentially exploitable vulnerability, if one of those 19 new potentially exploitable vulnerabilities surfaces in your environment, that you have to fix it? None of them say, thou shalt fix the whole. However, they all say, if you have a new potentially exploitable vulnerability inside your environment, one, you better know that it's there. Two, you better know how many iterations of it could be found inside your environment. And if you have an outside third-party source that can give you the probability of that thing actually being exploited, if the probability is low enough, you can use that for your rationale for not fixing the whole. And I use that right there as an illustration to say, one, this automatic, or this background automatic actionable intelligence piece becomes very, very, very important. Do you want your IT staff spending all their time figuring out, one, are there new vulnerabilities out there? What are they? And do we have them in our environment? Or is that something you could do with some automation? And then being able to respond them with automation as well resolves the security exposure that those potentially exploitable vulnerabilities surface. My whole point here is that with respect to compliance as well as security is sort of a moving target. It's changing on a day-to-day basis, and anything we can do to automate those processes is going to be very, very helpful. And then remediation. Wouldn't it be cool if there were some technologies out there that could take a feed anywhere from this stack? There's a server that's running a service that doesn't need to be there. There's a patch that needs to be updated, and there's some viral definitions that need to be put on a particular endpoint, and could see that these shortcomings, if you will, are there, and could go get the patch and install it, update the virus definitions, turn off the service, and then at the end of the day, upper right-hand corner, you get a report that's sitting on your desk, or end of the week, whenever it was you want it. That's a high level of automation, and again, all that is designed, or should be designed, to eliminate people as much as possible from all this equation. That's not to say that people aren't needed anymore. Certainly there's plenty for IT staff to do. The whole point is there is so much to do that to the degree we can take this information-centric model and automate it, the better off everybody's going to be. The last word. I am typically a very optimistic person, and I hate to end this on sort of a down note, but my purpose in basically building out this information-centric model is to give you maybe a wake-up call. The point is that this information-centric model is where you need to be today, in light of where the risk/threat landscape is today, that wild, wicked world outside the four walls of your business. The requirements to deal with those issues are basically the driving force behind putting this particular model together. If you're not there yet, obviously you have some work to do. My purpose, though, is to build some foundational steps, or make some foundational statements, so we can talk about the future, what's going to happen tomorrow and the day after that, and where you perhaps need to be looking as far as preparing for those days. Obviously, if we can do some things proactively or preemptively, that winds up being a lot less expensive and obviously much more helpful as far as defining and mitigating risk. So, that being said, I would covet your questions, your comments. Should you choose to like this, that would be great. If you choose not to like this, that would be not so great, but that's obviously your choice. I would suggest, though, that you, if you will, subscribe to this. This is only one in what I believe to be, or what is going to be, a long series of these. I intend to do this for quite a little while out, and frankly, the security landscape changes on a regular basis, and so these may be getting shorter, as they don't need to be quite as complex, but certainly they'll be coming out as frequently. Thanks.